of all, that entrepreneurs are everywhere, that entrepreneurship is management, that the unit of progress of entrepreneurship is called validated learning, that we can steer startups using something called the build, measure, learn feedback loop, and last, we can hold entrepreneurs accountable if we change our accounting paradigm to something like innovation accounting. So we talked about entrepreneurs being everywhere, and I think this is especially salient for this audience. If we're going to get better at entrepreneurship, we have to be rigorous about our definitions, and so here's mine. You think about what is a startup. It is a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So it has nothing to do with how big your company is. It has nothing to do with what sector of the economy or industry you work in. It is fundamentally not just a product, not just an idea, but an organization trying to innovate. And that last condition, the extreme uncertainty, is probably the most important part of the definition. It's a world in which we cannot adequately plan or forecast what's going to happen in the future because we don't yet know. And that's just a really fancy way of saying that a startup is an experiment. But it's not the kind of experiment of the 20th century that has to do with what can be built. The question for our time, most of the startups we build today, the dominant question is not what can be built, but what should be built, because in the technology sphere especially, we can build anything that we can imagine. And so if we think about our startups as experiments, everything we do, every feature, every marketing campaign, everything is an experiment to help us figure out, are we in fact on the path to a sustainable business? It can unlock much more efficient ways of working. And that leads us to the problem that I want to address today, which is that right now, as we speak, all of us are busy wasting people's time on an industrial scale. What differentiates the successful founders from the unsuccessful ones is that when they encounter difficulty, they don't just give up and go home, but neither do they persevere the plane straight into the ground through stubbornness. They do this very interesting thing where they keep one foot firmly anchored in what was working and change one other thing about their business at a time. We call it a pivot. A pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. So the courage of the entrepreneurs that I admire is the willingness to get negative feedback, to get actual data that says our strategy isn't working, and be willing to make a change without giving up on the vision. We believe that the right way to think about startup runway, every startup has a runway, which is how much time before we run out of money, run out of key resources in an established company, often before we run out of political capital and someone pulls the plug. But I think a better way to think about runway is rather how many opportunities to pivot do we have left? And when you think about it that way, this is what makes the lean startup method more capital efficient. We believe that if we can reduce the time between pivots, we can increase our odds of success before we run out of money. So it's not that we're going to learn to code faster, build things faster, measure faster. It's fundamental that we're going to get to the moment of pivoting a little bit sooner. And that will have the effect of increasing the number of pivots we'll have, which means we'll be able to increase runway without having to raise more money. So let's start talking about validated learning. This is the heart of the model. In most of the companies that I have built that have failed, we did something I call achieving failure, which is where we have a really successful business plan, and we successfully execute it just like it says in the plan, and yet we still don't see success. So if you go to your typical startup board meeting or you meet with an entrepreneurial team, the conversation is almost always about, are we on time, are we on budget, are we hitting our milestones, are we executing the plan that we laid out? And yet my question is, if we're busy building something that nobody wants, why on earth are we so proud of having done it on time and on budget and with high quality? It's like we're driving a car straight up a cliff and bragging about our excellent gas mileage as we go over the side. And I had to learn that the hard way through a lot of companies that fail. The right way to drive waste out of your development process is to be lean, or since we were in software, we called it agile. To see everything through the eyes of the customer. Deming made famous the idea that the customer is the most important part of the production line. And yet the challenge that we wound up facing, as you'll see in a moment, is that these ideas are very difficult to apply if we don't yet know who the customer is. So In 2004, we created this company called IMVU, and we wanted to build this software that would bring 3D avatars to what was then the hot new social technology called instant messaging. We wanted to build this product that would interoperate with all the different instant messaging clients because we knew from our study of strategy that instant messaging is a network effects business. You can't bring a new IM network to market because everyone already has a network and they would have to bring all their friends with them. That creates high switching costs, which means instant messaging is a business characterized by a high barrier to entry for a new network. And so we thought we would get around that strategic problem by having our software interoperate with all the existing networks. And I was the chief technology officer of this company, so I personally wrote thousands and thousands of lines of software to do this interoperability. And we gave ourselves a hard deadline of 6 months. We said, all right, we're going to work for 6 months, and then we're going to release this product and see what customers thought. And if you think about kind of 3D avatars and virtual currency and social network and an instant messaging client, all this interoperability software, and you say, gosh, they only had a small team in 6 months and no funding, everyone here will know the saying, time, quality, money, pick two, which is anytime you hear that engineer say that, it's just code for this product sucks. And this was no exception. I mean, this is a product that I'm embarrassed to say, when we launched it, would be as likely to crash your computer as it would be to give you a 3D avatar experience. And so I was really nervous as the CTO of this company. Oh my God, some journalist will get our first version and they'll write an article about it, and I see this big newspaper headline, idiots at IMVU don't know what quality software means, never hire them again, and there's my mugshot, But we were even more nervous about building something that nobody wants, and so we thought, all right, we will launch it anyway and see what happens. And I kid you not that at first I was actually relieved when it turned out that no one would even try the product. In fact, no one would even download it. So, at least nobody found out how bad it was. And, my technical part of me was relieved. I was like, phew, well, that dodged a bullet there. But then I started to get kind of upset because, to make a really long story short, we wound up having to pivot the business away from the instant messaging add-on, which customers hated, and towards a standalone network. And as a result, thousands of lines of software that I personally had written got thrown away. If my goal these past 6 months was to learn this important thing about customers, why did it take 6 months? How come the word learning is only coming up now as an excuse? And I started to think about that, and I said, wait a minute. What would it have looked like if we'd spent these 6 months specifically focused on trying to learn whether customers want our product? What might we have done differently? For example, did we really have to support 12 different instant messaging networks right out of the gate? Or would we have the same learning with only 6? Yeah. But what about with only 3 the same? Well, what about if we supported only 1? Now that's already an order of magnitude reduction in the amount of code we would have had to write, and yet the learning value would have been the same. But that was not the worst part. Here's the worst part. I said to myself, hold on. What if we had just created a single web page with a screenshot of the product we proposed to build and a gigantic download button? Would we even have had to create page 2 where we apologize that the product's not ready for download yet? So I want to propose an alternate accounting paradigm that we can use to hold entrepreneurs accountable to something more reasonable than vanity metrics. And this was inspired by something that I saw in a book called The Toyota Way, which is a really powerful book I'm sure many of you have read about the origins of the lean production process. Fundamentally, the way we hold entrepreneurs accountable is what allows them to make good process choices, which then gives rise to a culture of innovation. Culture is just the artifact of our old process decisions, and that all is in service of enabling people to make better decisions. But this accountability piece requires a new accounting system. Otherwise, we're always going to get the same old behavior that we've gotten before. If you're holding an entrepreneur accountable to vanity metrics, they have to hit 10 million customers by the end of the year, you know exactly what's going to happen 11 months in when they only have 1,000 customers. But in any event, they'll want to do a big publicity stunt, a one-time unsustainable thing that drives a ton of customers, that drives absolutely no learning. So that's what we have to fight against, and so that's what innovation accounting is for. I want to try to get us away from the product and business milestones and towards what I call learning milestones. So if we can pull these up, this really amazing book just came out, and I hope that you will all get a copy. And I hope that you will all be in touch with me. My contact info is on the screen. Thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate it.